All right, now we're going into lesson number 13. Create a structure with primitives. So this is a continuation of the previous lesson. And on this lesson, you will practice how you can apply your understanding of game objects and transform to build a structure out of 3D primitives. So you will add primitives to an empty scene, just like you've been doing, and you're also going to add a game object as a parent for other game objects. And make sure the version that you have is the 2021.3, and also make sure that you are logged in. Okay, and you're going to duplicate game objects and you're going to play with them around. So this is essentially an exercise in which you will build a game object made of multiple primitives. On this exercise, you will have a firm grasp of how to create and manipulate game objects. And you will also practice how to navigate in a scene. You're going to use a structure and you're going to add a surface to catch and deflect falling objects. The structure you'll build can be anything you want, as long as it can be built from primitive cubes, spheres, cylinders, and capsules. It also should have stairs, slopes, curves, and other interesting shapes, so that the falling object will roll, bounce, and tumble. And here's an example of a structure you can build. As you build a structure, you may want to manipulate your view of the scene as you work to make sure game objects are aligned. For a review, see the practice navigating the game scene. And this is something that you already did, because you already did the whole lesson of exploring the Unity editor. So you can mark step number 1 as completed. So now what you're going to do is to create an empty game object. An empty game object is a placeholder object that can be created in the hierarchy. It does not have a visible representation in the scene, and it can act as a container for other game objects. You can right click in the hierarchy and select create empty. Create empty. So you're going to create an empty placeholder object. So you can go here to the hierarchy and create empty. So I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna create an empty. Create empty. There we go. So it's just a placeholder. Okay. Rename this game object to structure in the inspector. Its name will also change in the hierarchy. You can rename objects from the hierarchy as well. So we're gonna call it structure. So you double click on it and call it structure. Excellent. If the position of your empty game object isn't at 0, 0, 0, as in the example above, you can reset it to the center of the scene in one easy step. In the inspector, select more to the right of the transform component header and then select reset position. So here you can do reset position. In the inspector, select more to the right to the transform component header and then select reset position. So here's the inspector, the 3 dots, reset. So it should be everything on 0. So it's not under the inspector, is under transform. 3 dots, reset. Okay. Now you can mark step as completed. Now create a floor for your structure. That's step number 3. Begin your structure by creating a base surface, which we'll call the floor, on which you can build other features. In the hierarchy, right-click the structure game object and select 3D object cube to create a new cube primitive as a child of the empty game object. So we're going to add a cube under the structure, game object, cube. And it's not the child, but I'm gonna nest it so that way it's inside of the structure. Okay. So rename this new game object floor. I'm gonna rename it floor. So double click on the cube and we're gonna call it floor. In the inspector, locate the transform component and the scale coordinates in the floor game object. So change the scale to 20, 0, 2, 20 to create a floor to your structure. So on the floor, we'll go on the scale and we do 20, 0, 2, 20. So 20, 0, 2, 20. There we go. We created it. That's really cool. And as you can see, I already had two objects here, but so it doesn't have to look exactly like the one over there or exactly like mine. The goal is for you to create a structure. Okay. So zoom out and move other game objects out of the way to view your floor as desired. I'm just gonna leave mine the way it is. Mark a step as completed. Now add to your structure. Next, add more child game objects to your structure because objects will be falling on it. You will need stairs, slopes, and curves to make it interesting. Let's start with some stairs. In the hierarchy, right-click the floor game object and select duplicate. Shortcut, select floor and press Ctrl D. In the Mac OS, Ctrl CMD, Command D, and you will see a new child in your hierarchy named floor in the same position as floor. Rename floor to stair. This will be one stair and you can create as many more as you like. So in the hierarchy, right click the floor game object and you can do Command D or select duplicate. So let's see here. Duplicate. Okay, so I created a duplicate, but it's also a child of the structure. In the inspector, locate the transform component of stair, change its scale and position so that it sits on top of the floor and is slightly smaller. So here they did 18, 0, 2, 18. So the image below shows an example of how you might scale and position the first stair. So I'll do that too. So 18, 18, 0, 2, 18. Okay, so now I have another one on top. Okay. And this result would look like this. And yeah, that's kind of like what mine looks like. I'm just on a different angle, so you don't really see the other one, but yeah, I can see it. So yours should look similar. It doesn't have to look exactly the same, but it should look similar. So repeat these instructions to add more stairs. Make them narrower, taller, or whatever you like. So you can try a couple of techniques. Use the move and scale tools, as well as the inspector, to resize and reposition your stairs. Use the rotate tool and rotation coordinates in the transform component to make diagonal stairs and slope surfaces. Be sure to change your view of the structure to make sure the objects are aligned the way you want them. So you can just play around and do duplicate. And then just like make this one smaller. I'm gonna do 16. 16 and I leave this one in 0.2. Okay, so there's another one over there. Create a little bit of a structure with the stairs. So what I did was to, on the main floor, so you create a structure, right? That's the floor. Scale 1, 1, 1 in the transform. Part of the Inspector, rotation 0, 0, 0, position 0, 0, 0. The floor, position 0, 0, 0, rotation 0, 0, 0, scale 20, 0, 2, 20. And then I added multiple layers of the floor by duplicating the game object. Floor number 1, scale 18, 0.418, position 0.2. And then you create a duplicate. And then the duplicate will be 16, 04, 16, position 0.4 on Y. Okay. Then the duplicate, the scale of X and Z will be smaller, and Y will be 0.6, and you can play around. The idea is to create the stairs. Then the other element will be 12, 0.4, and then 12, and then Y will be 0.8, and then it can go around the scale of X and Z smaller because the stairs have to be smaller, and then you can play around with Y, so that way it goes on top of each other. All right, so that will be step number 4, and you can play around with it, and after you're done you can mark the step as completed. And you can nest and combine multiple objects. You have seen game objects organized as a parent and child game objects, but you can also nest and combine game objects on multiple levels in your hierarchy. This technique can help you create and organize parent game objects that are far more complex. And follow the steps below to learn more, but feel free to change the shapes and transform to your own structure because you're going to create your own structure. The images below are examples. To add a smaller structure to your main structure, create another empty object in your hierarchy. In the hierarchy, select the empty game object, then right-click and select 3D object in cube to add a cube primitive as a child of the empty game object. And then you can scale the cube primitive to create a platform that will fit on your structure, like you might see for a statue or a fountain. So be creative, transform and add other child game objects to make a feature for your structure. You can rename this feature in your hierarchy. In the example, it's named Plinth. In the hierarchy, select the game parent, the game object of your feature, and drag it on top of the structure game object to make the entire game object a child of structure. And the results should look something like the image below. So the idea is to create multiple hierarchies. So try to create at least a couple of buildings, or 3 or 4, and rotate them, play with them, move them around. When you have done that, mark the step as completed. And then, yes, add spheres, cylinders, capsules to create your final structure. Something like that. Every new game object should be a child of the structure game object. You can create a hierarchy as simple or complex as you want to meet your needs. Keep in mind that you will use this structure as a surface for falling objects. Create surfaces where objects can bounce, roll, and tumble. Keep the size of your structure at 20 or 20 units or more on the horizontal plane. 20 times 20. The image below is just an example. Your own possibilities are endless. And after you're done that, you can mark the step as completed. And you can adjust the light in the scene. When your structure is built, you may want to adjust the lighting. In a new 3D scene, an object named directional light is included to simulate sunlight. You can manipulate the direction of this light by rotating it. Changing the position or scale of the directional light game object has no effect. So you can just play around with the light. Like for example, I go to my structure, I look for the let's see, where's the light over here? So we have the main camera, we have the sun, sky info volume. Okay. So yeah, here is called the sun. So you can change the light of the sun by putting the rotate tool into the sun, and then you can rotate it and you can play around with the light. That would be really cool. So change it that way so that you understand where the sun is coming from. You can see now it's kind of like coming from, it's kind of like the afternoon. So play around with it, and after you have played around with it, mark the step as completed. So in the following steps, you're going to create a duplicate game objects. You're going to adjust the directional light, and after you have done that, mark the step as completed, and it should give you more points. Great work today.